united forever in friendship and labor, our mighty republics will ever endure. The great Soviet Union will live through the ages, the dream of a people, their fortress secure. Long live our Soviet motherland, built by the people's mighty hand. Long live our people, united and free, strong in a friendship tried by fire. Long may our crimson flag inspire, shining in glory for all men to see. Through days dark and stormy, while great Lenin led us, our eyes saw the bright sun of freedom above, and Stalin, our leader, with faith in the people, inspired us to build the land that we love. For the future, destroyed the invader, and brought to our homeland the laurels of fame. Her glory will live in the memory of nations, and all generations will honor her name. Long live our Soviet motherland, built by the people's mighty hand. Long live her people, united and free, strong in a friendship tried by fire. Long may our crimson flag inspire, shining in glory for all men to see.
Thank you. I want to welcome everyone tonight to the U.S. Friends of the Soviet People webinar. Tonight we will be celebrating 100 years since the formation of the United Soviet Socialist Republics. We are going to have a wide range of speakers tonight, and we also are going to go over some video greetings and written greetings that we got sent from other parties around the world. A brief introduction. Chair of the U.S. Friends of the Soviet People. And again, I just want to welcome everyone here tonight for the celebration. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Angelo D'Angelo for a brief introduction on the history of the U.S. Friends of the Soviet People.
How you doing, comrades? I'm glad everybody came. This is an important event for us. 100 years, 1922 to 2022. 100 years the USSR was set up. And it was changed the whole world. Everybody on this phone, Zoom, knows that. The whole world was changed. It was the first time that workers and peasants formed their own government, this planet Earth. It was the first time. There was an experiment that lasted many years. Remember, the Paris Commune lasted 70 days. This lasted over 70 years. As Marx said, there are ebbs and there are flows in the revolutionary movement. And so we went from 7 days in the Paris Commune to 70 years. And now, the next time around, we expect it to be 700, that kind of idea. So the 1920s, the Comintern decided to set up a movement with all the communist parties around the world called Support Soviet Russia Committees. And they set up Friends of the Soviet Union movement all around. And in this country, the United States, the National Council of American Soviet Friendship was set up. And it lasted from the 20s all the way up till 1991, when the counter-revolution in Russia succeeded in getting rid of socialism temporarily and setting up capitalism again. And so the U.S. Friends of Soviet People was set up in 1992 and was still around. And our job is to create an international movement against U.S. imperialism and to help the peoples in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union regain scientific socialism. So we're basically a support committee, just the way we had during the period in Nicaragua. We had it supporting El Salvador and Nicaragua in the 70s. We have now a movement to support bringing back scientific socialism in the Soviet Union. And that's what U.S. Friends is about, and that's why we're sponsoring this. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for that, Angelo. Next, we are going to go over our written greetings that we had sent in. The very first one I will read out is going to be from the Communists of Russia, and that reads, "Greetings to American comrades from Russian communists. I, as a representative of the Russian youth, want to express my gratitude to the American communists for supporting Russia in resisting Nazi aggression in Ukraine. Over the past 30 years, Russia has absorbed a lot of the values of the American people. We watch your movies, listen to your music, read your literature. In the 1990s, many Russian people went to live in the United States, and today they returned and we learned how to live there. I'm talking about this because the Soviet Union, the Soviet Communist Party, lost the Cold War precisely because the Russian people wanted capitalism for themselves. We wanted capitalism, looking at the US. We wanted to live like you, not realizing that the American people are the same slave of capital as we were before the revolution, and who we became after the destruction of the USSR. Today, more and more Russian people of all nationalities understand the advantages of socialism, and we believe that the restoration of the USSR awaits Russia. The time will come when communists around the world will defeat capitalism, each in his own country. We will win." And again, that is from the Communists of Russia. And the next one we have is from the editorial staff of the All-Union Communist Party Bolsheviks of Russia. It says, "Editorial board of the site vkpb.ru. Greetings to the members of the U.S. Friends of the Soviet People, participants of the meeting dedicated to the 100th anniversary of the formation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The USSR, the first socialist state on earth, was born as a result of the October Revolution of 1917, which took place in Russia under the leadership of V.I. Lenin. Torn apart by socio-political and national contradictions, the Russian Empire naturally came to its collapse. But in its place, a new state emerged, uniting hundreds of peoples on a new basis. In December 1922, the Soviet republics united into a single state, still unprecedented in history. Its basis was the dictatorship of the proletariat and socialist construction. The Soviet people, led by I.V. Stalin and the Bolshevik Party, industrialized in a short time, collectivized agriculture, put an end to the illiteracy of the population, and raised the development of the scientific industry to new heights. The Union State, under the dictatorship of the proletariat, was successfully solved national issues, and the friendship of peoples was replaced the former distrust and hostility between the nationalities. The USSR passed the test of strength during the Second World War, when the fascist hordes of Western Europe descended on it. The Soviet people not only defeated the aggressors, but also extended a helping hand to the peoples of Eastern Europe and Asia, who fought for the establishment of people's democratic regimes. After Stalin's death, with the coming to power of the Khrushchev clique, the processes of revision and rejection of Bolshevism began, and a departure from the principle of the dictatorship of the proletariat was announced. Despite the negative processes that began in the 1950s and 1960s, and in the last decades of its existence, the USSR served as an example to the peoples of the world. being a country where people lived without capitalists, without private property, and wars. As philosophers truly say, everything great makes its way by force, but the decline happens gradually. The world reaction could not accept the existence of the Soviet Union. All the decades of its existence, reactionaries waged a subversive war to destroy the first socialist state. In this case, they found allies among the reborn revisionist renegades of the CPSU. As a result of the perestroika, the USSR was destroyed, pulled to pieces, despite the fact that on March 17, 1991, the Soviet people said yes to the preservation of the Union state in a nationwide referendum. Now, on the wreckage of a once great country, previously unthinkable disasters of peoples are taking place. But the world bourgeoisie triumphed early. The bourgeois reaction is doomed to defeat, just as the feudal reaction was doomed to defeat in its time, which also triumphed in 1815 after the collapse of the revolution in France. In vain, the reactionaries hoped that the new, young generations who did not know life in the USSR would forget about the great achievements of their ancestors. On the contrary, we see how in Russia and other republics of the former USSR, more and more people are showing interest in the ideas of scientific communism. The struggle for socialism will enter a new stage. At this new stage of the anti-imperialist struggle, the example of the socialist construction of the USSR will shine on the fighters like a torch on the way. In the course of new popular revolutions, new socialist republics will appear on the world map, and the question of their unification will inevitably rise. This means that the future of humanity is the world Soviet Union, and that is dated December 15th, 2022. So again, that was the All-Union Communist Party Bolsheviks of Russia. And we very much appreciate those two written greetings that we got from those two groups. Moving along, we also had video greetings that were sent in. The very first one that we will have is from the Communist Party of Germany.
In 40 plus countries, a third of the population of the world, understanding the role of NATO and US wars is a way to forge unity and move forward together. So thank you very much for today and this celebration of 100 years of the unity it took to forge the Soviet Union.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Again, Sarah Flounders with the Workers' World Party and the International Action Center. Again, thank you very much. That was a very, very beautiful speech.
За предоставленную возможность участия в мероприятии празднования столетия образования СССР. Начало 20 века все отчетливее и контрасте предстает перед нами как ключевой момент всей истории. После того, как пролетариат в Российской империи, названный по меткому выражению Ленина «тюрьмой народов», совершил социалистическую революцию и разгромил белогвардейцев с интервентами, появилось нечто ранее невиданное. Государство, в котором правит трудовой народ, и вся экономика работает на благо и обеспечение безопасности трудящихся. Это государство, Союз Советских Социалистических Республик, смогло возникнуть в первую очередь благодаря твердости и демократической организованности российского рабочего класса. Октябрьская революция и основание СССР стали новым отчетом истории. Советский социализм задал стандарты для развития всего мира. Решение социальных вопросов в СССР в интересах трудящихся стало отличным инструментом для переформатирования прежнего мироустройства. Слово «совет» лежит в основе всех названий рабочей власти нашей страны. Октябрьская революция провозгласила советскую власть. Что же это означает? Еще в 1905 году, в разгар Первой русской революции, в ряде промышленных городов возникли ситуации, когда на одной территории действовало сразу несколько забастовочных комитетов. Объединение выборочных представителей от разных стачкомов и получило название советов. Из собраний рабочих, созданных для решения отдельных задач, советы быстро превратились в универсальные руководящие органы, способные принимать постановления по широкому кругу вопросов и организовывать их выполнение. Оставив серьезный вслед в революции 1905-1907 годов, советы снова появились в первые дни февраля в 1917 году. Октябрьская революция установила советскую власть. Классовая сущность Советов создавала внутри них такие условия, при которых все борющиеся силы вынуждены были считаться с интересами пролетариата. В этом заключается одно из отличий Советов от парламента. При видимой демократичности буржуазных парламентах имеется явная тенденция к уменьшению количества делегатов, представляющих людей труда. В сегодняшней Российской Госдуме нет ни одного рабочего депутата. Парламенты исторически создавались как органы господства эксплуататоров, в то время как Советы имеют противоположную основу. Советы прекрасно подходят для решения всех вопросов рабочего класса. Начав с организации снабжения семей забастовщиков, Советы, как классовые организации пролетариата, оказались способны постоянно улучшать быт рабочих огромной страны, провести электрификацию и индустриализацию, и организовали лучшую в мире систему массового образования, решили вопросы обороны и становления науки. Советская власть стала основой для создания СССР и утверждения его общественно-политического строя, социализма. Как только рабочие научились создавать свои собственные организации для целей классовой борьбы, они стали силой. Эта сила превосходила все, что ранее было создано под властью эксплуататоров. Что такое СССР? Это первый в мире опыт построения социализма мирового масштаба. Именно опыт воплощения данного порыва революции во всех направлениях, огромный тектонический сдвиг, это то, что будет волновать умы народов мира до достижения подлинной свободы. Несмотря на то, что СССР просуществовало только на протяжении 20 века, количество положительных изменений, которые были вызваны его существованием, едва ли поддаются простому исчислению. Революционный заряд строительства Советского Союза высвободил невероятный творческий потенциал народа новой страны. Огромный порыв в производстве, продемонстрировав невиданные доселе темпы развития промышленности, в образовании, в кратчайшие сроки обучив миллионные массы, в науке, символом которой стал первый полет человека в космос, в архитектуре и дизайне, приводя принцип функциональной красоты, в искусстве, сделавшем Москву в 30-е годы столицей мирового киноавангарда, в быту и многом другом. Нельзя не упомянуть о праве на труд, бесплатной медицине и образовании, подлинном равноправии между мужчиной и женщиной и всех бесчисленных завоеваниях рабочего класса под руководством коммунистической партии, борьба с мракобесием и националистическими пережитками, а со второй половины 20 века движение за мир и ядерное разоружение стали неизменным атрибутом коммунистической политики советской страны. Социализм подарил стране, где отцы и матери не умели читать и писать, детей и внуков космонавтов, профессоров, ученых. Небывалый технический прогресс был достигнут благодаря масштабной плановой экономике, способной с нуля построить гигантские отрасли промышленности, работающие как слаженный организм. Именно это, помноженное на принципы коммунистической морали, позволило СССР сломить хребет фашизма в Европе и открыть дорогу для целого ряда революционных и национально-освободительных движений по всему миру, в первую очередь в угнетенных странах, то есть странах третьего мира. Развал Советского Союза возродил самые реакционные силы капитализма, национализма и фашизма, дал возможность буржуазии осуществлять повсеместное наступление на трудовые права, которые рабочие всего мира завоевали благодаря существованию Советского Союза, внесшего огромный вклад в дело развития трудовых отношений и охраны труда. Есть еще один огромнейший плюс социалистического общества, о котором не так часто говорят. Это качественно другой подход к человеческим отношениям, к товариществу в масштабах всей страны. Нам, членам революционного комсомола, посчастливилось быть знакомыми с такими людьми, которые после наступления капитализма в стране остались верны этим принципам. Так являлся ли СССР неким идеальным обществом без недостатков, волшебной палочкой, внезапно разрешающей все насущные проблемы? Безусловно, проблемы в СССР были, хотя и далеко не такие значительные, как их представляют наши идейные противники и даже некоторые обыватели. Значительная часть проблем была связана с тем, что это был передовой опыт создания социалистического общества такого масштаба. Многие проблемы планирования можно было легко разрешить современными техническими возможностями. Объективный и беспристрастный анализ проблем строительства социализма – важная исследовательская задача коммунистов. Отмечая столетие СССР, мы в первую очередь подтверждаем свою убежденность и правильность выбранного пути. СССР – это важнейший опыт для мирового пролетариата на дороге достижения полного коммунизма. Октябрьская революция и строительство социализма в СССР дали нам теорию, практический опыт построения государства, диктатуры пролетариата. Сегодня важно внимательно изучить этот опыт, в том числе критически, и использовать его в нашей агитации и пропаганде среди трудящихся, в первую очередь, пролетариата. Новый мировой капиталистический кризис продолжает углубляться. Его развитие неизбежно приведет к тому, что народам потребуется вспомнить опыт Великого Октября и строительства СССР. И никакая буржуазная пропаганда не сможет остановить трудящихся, которые снова поставят вопрос о построении мира без эксплуатации и отчуждения. Ротфронт!
All right. That greeting was from the Russian Communist Workers' Party, and I believe we may have a speaker here present later. The next video, let's go ahead and we will share the greetings from the Communist League of Finland.
Dear comrades, first of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important webinar. This year marks 100 years since the founding of the Soviet Union. The importance of the Soviet Union to the working class of the world was great. In Russia, the revolution freed the people from serfdom and gave a bright outlook for the future. The importance and sacrifice of the Soviet Union in the fight against fascism cannot be underestimated either. The Soviet Union also influenced the struggles of the working class in capitalist countries in many ways. For example, in Finland, the victory of the Soviet Union in Second World War gave freedom to the working class. Before this, the activities of communists in Finland were banned, and leftist and trade union activists were severely persecuted. After the war, the economy grew strongly, and with the struggle of the working class, we managed to achieve free healthcare and education, for example. The living conditions of the working class also improved strongly. The Finnish purchase had to give into the demands of the working class because the working class strongly relied on socialism. The purchase feared that without concession Finland would move to socialism. It was said that in wage and collective bargaining negotiations, in addition to the employer and employee, a third invisible negotiator sat at the table, the Soviet Union. Today, we live in a time of strong crisis of capitalism. We have faced social and environmental problems that cannot be solved under capitalism. It is good to remember that in the Soviet Union a lot of attention was paid to nature conservation and environmental protection, even though serious environmental problems also arose there. Soviet scientists already pointed out in the late 1970s that the main environmental problem of the future will be global warming. This significant research result did not receive attention in the West. Thus, we are dealing with a very serious environmental crisis today. It can be asked, would climate change have been stopped more effectively if Soviet Union had not collapsed? It probably would. Western media demonized the Soviet Union. Almost every day propaganda is published according to which the Soviet Union and its legacy are very negative. However, this is not true. Full employment prevailed in the Soviet Union. Everyone was guaranteed housing. Education and healthcare were free. These are things that have never been achieved in any capitalist country, and they can never be achieved. it is very important to highlight the achievements of the Soviet Union. When we think about what socialism means in the future, we must not underestimate the experience of the Soviet Union. We don't have to abandon what was done in the Soviet Union, but we had to develop it further, taking into account the current science and social situation. This is why I consider it's very important to organize such seminars and webinars. I wish you webinar success. Long live socialism. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, that was from the Communist League in Finland. Next, we have a video greeting from the Union of Basque Communists, the EKB. Their video is in another language. We are going to provide the English translation in the chat so people can read along.
Here in the Basque Country, we have personal reasons to sympathize with the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union was the only country that support the Basque Country and the anti-fascist Spain in the civil war between 1936 and 1939, when all the Western Europe left Spain for free to the fascist countries, and the Soviet Union has the host for a lot of children of anti-fascist families that were sold to fascist forces in Spain. That is the first reason for us to support the Soviet Union. The second is we, as the Solidarity Committee of Donbass, we were very thankful to the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union is the one of peace in Europe and in the rest of the world. The aggressive NATO campaign against Russia, the coup of state in the Ukraine, the aggressive bombing of Yugoslavia in 1999 they are products of the absence of Soviet Union. If the Soviet Union was alive, there was nothing at all would happen. But the absence of the Soviet Union was in favor of the reactionary and expansive forces of the NATO. Third of all, the Soviet Union was a warrantor of national emancipation for countries in Africa, in Asia. It has to be remembered that the Third International of Lenin, the Comintern, was the first worldwide organization that African, Asian, and Latin American parties were invited to. No in the Second International, not in the Wilson's League for Peace, where no African, black people, Asian people, but in the Lenin's International, they were. Now in Western Europe, Western world, the new left that goes for ecology, feminism, and other things, it's a strength to forget the advances of the Soviet Union. For example, in the women's liberation project, the Soviet Union was a country that ensured both politically and materially the liberation for women. Both from the liberation and the equal rights in politics, but also for equal rights in the life.
4 minutes.
So, Soviet Union was a country that ensured that women could work in factories, and also that could take the children kindergartens in factories to women to can work. That was in the Western Europe that they came from. That is a feminist reivindication in the 70s. The Soviet Union assured that in the 30s, 40 years before. But as communists, I want to make a call. We as communists cannot that with reindicate the consensus, the Borges consensus about the Soviet Union, like what advanced the Soviet Union had made, the communist movement had made in basic bourgeois rights, because Soviet Union was not a project to ensure the basic bourgeois rights, but was a project to finish with the class domination and finish with social classes. So we have to hail the Soviet Union because what it achieved, but we have to be also honest with the project of the Soviet Union, that was an equal world. There was the supervision of capitalism, the supervision of the law of value managed society, and we cannot evaluate the Soviet Union only under the democratic bourgeois framework. We have to make, for the sake of optimism, we cannot cheat ourselves, and we have to make
6 minutes.
real and honest balance of the Soviet Union in order to get forward the capitalism and to abolish the social classes, The Soviet Union, in his 70 years of history, was the first socialist experiment. Angelo D'Angelo has mentioned the Paris Commune. Soviet Union went far along the Paris Commune. Paris Commune did not abolish the private property on household or in factories, and Soviet Union did it. Unfortunately, there were some contradictions inside the Soviet society.
Comrade, you have 30 seconds remaining. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Okay. There were some incapabilities to superate, to get along that contradictions, and that led to the fall of the Soviet Union. But we have to be honest with the balance and take honest lessons about that great experience in the history of proletariat. Thank you to all for listening and for inviting.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And again, that was the Union of Basque Communists, EKB.
Dear comrades, this year we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Soviet Union, the beginning of a socialist world built on sovereignty, peace and justice, and also the end of the old, the capitalist world, built on colonialism, violence and exploitation. The Soviet Union was the product of the great socialist October Revolution and showed all of the world the superiority of the socialist system. In only a few years, the Soviet Union changed from an underdeveloped agrarian state into the second biggest economy of the world. Unemployment, homelessness, social insecurities, that things were overcome in the Soviet Union. Education is one of the topics where you can see the developments brought by socialism. Best. Before the October Revolution, 70 to 80% of the people in Russia couldn't read. In 1930, 19% of the population could read, only 13 years after the revolution. The Soviet Union destroyed fascism, for which we as Germans and all other people oppressed by the fascists are very grateful. And only 16 years later, after this gigantic war, the Soviet Union was able to send the first man into space, again showing everyone on the world the benefits of the socialist system. The imperialists learned during the 20th century that they couldn't beat socialism only with military violence. Not in Korea, not in Vietnam, and not in the Soviet Union. So they started the arms race and installed traitors at the leadership of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, leading to the counter-revolution in the first socialist state in the world. But the Soviet Union isn't dead. The Soviet Union still lives in the hearts of millions of workers and communists all over the world. The people in Russia and other former Soviet republics remember the higher living standards in Soviet times and the benefits of socialism. And the Soviet Union terrifies the imperialists even 30 years after the counter-revolution. That's why the German parliament lies about the so-called Holodomor in Ukraine, in which Stalin would have killed Ukrainians on purpose with hunger. That's why they don't allow the Soviet flag at the Day of Liberation from fascism. That's why they throw a comrade out of his home for raising the Soviet flag at his home. Even 30 years after the counter-revolution, only the memory of the Soviet Union is powerful enough to terrify the bourgeoisie. And today, Cuba and the DPRK continue the heritage of the Soviet Union, and no sanctions and no imperialist aggression can stop them. Let's follow their example. For the USVR, the Union of the Socialist World Republic. Down with imperialism. Long live Lenin. Long live the Soviet Union. Rotfront.
Wonderful. And then that was from the Communist Party of Germany. Now we will, after the last video, we will transition to our first in-person speaker. I will hand the floor to them.
Good evening to everybody in the Western Hemisphere who's taking part in the conference, and bright early morning from Russian Federation and from the other former Soviet republics. When we talk about the Soviet Union now, we remember, as the previous speakers rightly did, the various accomplishments, social achievements that it brought about, but sometimes it's necessary, especially when we think about inspiration for those who need to take responsibility for the destiny of their peoples and destiny indeed of humanity now. What the Bolsheviks and what in general the October Revolution, perhaps unexpectedly for themselves, encountered, and what essentially brought about the Soviet Union existing in the form that it did. When the Great October Socialist Revolution happened, it would maintain first and foremost that the great secret of the Great October Socialist Revolution is that it was not a revolution per se. It was indeed a post-catastrophic reassembly, because didn't at the time when it came about, November 7th of 1917 on the new calendar, the Russian bourgeoisie, which came to power as a result of the February Revolution, which is often kind of forgotten or very briefly looked over nowadays, brought the former Russian Empire to such a state where really Russia essentially had ceased to exist as a single national entity, as a single social entity, and we had large segments of the country at that time falling off, and various movements with very obvious backing by foreign interventionists were arising, and these various new now they refer themselves as peoples which were supposedly enslaved by USSR, a term that came about during the Cold War.
6 minutes.
It essentially created just massive chaos throughout the space. And at that moment, when for the Russian people, in the broadest in the broadest term, the very question of will it continue to exist as a historical and social entity became painfully obvious, and was really the only question we're discussing. It was then that the October Revolution became possible, and it's not only possible, but it was the only historical way out. Okay, and it was taken. Revolutionary Russia found itself surrounded by a hostile rest of the world, which, based on forgive me for the term Marxist dogma of the time, came as a shock to the Bolshevik Party, because the overall expectation, and really this was an expectation to the degree that this was a known and obvious fact, that the October Revolution was supposed to serve as a catalyst for a large world revolution, first and foremost in the so-called progressive countries of Western Europe. And it was in this setting of a united world revolution that the future of humanity was seen, when it became clear that internationalism had failed the Russian Revolution. It became necessary to create something called socialism in a single country, which, according to the dogmatic understanding of the time, was something completely, again, pardon the term, blasphemous. Again, what turned out to be the only way out that was indeed viable and had a future. And indeed, we know from experience now, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that communism remains viable only in countries where it managed to integrate itself, where it was able to integrate itself with their own national liberation movements. So from that standpoint, what can I say to American communists? First of all, thank you for the support and remembering of the Soviet Union. Your goal then has to be to find the big relevance, okay, of communism to yourselves, to the own American tradition. And I'm sure that you'll be able to achieve this. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for that contribution. Let's see. Next, we are going to move on. I believe our next speaker is going to be Latvia.
So let's get to it. I would like to congratulate all of my comrades here, as well as the PCUSA, the USFSP, and all of the people of the world with the upcoming 100th anniversary since the foundation of the Soviet Union, and of course with the 105th anniversary of the October Revolution. I will not delve too much into history because we're in a short time limit, and I will also talk about the modern situation and what we as the communists should do about it. So the 100th anniversary of the Soviet Union was a monumental event that changed the entire world. Obviously, it changed every corner of the world for the good. Because, like many people mentioned here, it was the first lasting dictatorship of the proletariat established. And now, as you can see, the reactionaries, the capital imperialist forces, who are now in a very deep crisis, are trying to demonize socialism, communism, and the Soviet Union at every turn imaginable. They're trying to ignite conflicts and wars everywhere, including Ukraine, Russia, the Baltics, Taiwan, for example, the Balkans, and so on, including Africa, Latin America, for example, what is happening in Peru right now, and etc. Obviously, the foundation of the USSR was very important for Latvia as well, because the white forces, just like in Finland, have managed to win the civil war thanks to incredibly aggressive intervention from the Entente, from the crumbling German Empire.
2 minutes.
And of course, the Soviet Union remained a very close friend of the Latvian people, because Latvia has always been at the forefront of revolution together with our Russian, Polish, Ukrainian, and Belarusian brothers. And Latvia had 3 Soviet republics in total. The Iskalat Republic, which was founded shortly after the October Revolution, the first Socialist Republic established in 1919, and the Third Soviet Republic established in 1940, shortly after the revolution. But like our comrade here mentioned, the revisionist, the opportunist, and then fascist elements took root, and eventually the Baltics were used as the bulwark of the counter-revolution in order to initiate the destruction of the USSR, and with this reimposed the capitalist imperialist rule in our brotherly countries. And right now, you see that the capitalists have ignited the conflict in Ukraine in order to delay the socialist restoration, or to delay the revolution as much as possible. And the situation is difficult because these fascist authorities in the Baltics and Ukraine have adopted new anti-communist laws that, for example, make it essentially illegal to hold communist views as is. And what should we as the communists do in this situation? We have to remember that this is another imperialist war, but it's not the same war like it was in 1914. We have to remember that the Russian capitalism was installed in 1991 by imperialist powers. Russia is very subjugated, but this does not mean that we should, for example, blindly support one bourgeois side or the other. In this instance, we must absolutely support our comrades and the Russian communists and the Ukrainian communists and the communists of other countries in order to disrupt weapons shipments, in order to stop the influx of mercenaries, in order to stop this conflict. But we have to remember that if we let the capitalists sign the armistice or peace, this will be just a very brief pause before another war starts. What we should do is to reestablish the Soviets, reestablish the councils, the soldiers' councils, the workers' councils, the agricultural workers' councils, everywhere we can. We must destroy chauvinism, the attempts of restoration of ultranationalism and chauvinism. We must absolutely spread our ideas among the soldiers who are fighting right now, because we have to understand that these are our people. They were drafted from the workers. They were drafted from students, drafted from remaining rural workers. And these are our people, and we must absolutely work with them. And we should fight against attempts to arrest our comrades. We should fight for their freedom, like with the Kononovich brothers, who were released from prison, but now they're under house arrest, and we must absolutely fight for their and other comrades' freedom. And only by establishing the dictatorship of the proletariat in Ukraine and Russia, with other places following suit, we can end this particular war and other wars like it for good, because we have other progressive forces that we need to support. One of the leaders of the Latvian Revolution in the 20th century, Comrade Pēteris Stučka, said that the revolution in one particular country, especially small country like Latvia, is often not decided in this very country. It is decided on the main and most difficult front lines of the revolution. Because, for example, he said, if the Soviet government in Moscow fell, that the Latvian communists would be pushed into sea as well. And that is why it is important to strike at the weak spots of imperialism and support socialist construction and the class struggle in other places. For example, in order to support the comrades from China, from the DPRK, Cuba, etc. Only with this international solidarity, with this proletarian solidarity, and not just proletarian solidarity, internationalist solidarity, we can win and we can stop these criminal wars of imperialism. And I would love to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I think we'll, if people do have any questions that they would like to ask, you can send it to myself, and then we can maybe, if we have some time, we can go over some questions at the end. But thank you. That was a great speech, and I am very grateful that you were able to make it tonight. So thank you very much. Wonderful. Again, that was Basque Donbass Solidarity Community. And next on our list, we are going to go to the Workers' World Party and the International Action Center. Thank you very much for coming here. And I will hand the floor over to Sarah.
Thank you. And thank you, Friends of Soviet Peoples, for the invitation to participate in today's celebration. It's an honor to be here. The 100th anniversary, this is a big deal. A heroic anniversary. The 100th anniversary of the foundation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, a heroic anniversary, a first and monumental gain of the working class. The first time the working class held power was the Paris Commune. It lasted 70 days, as Marx explained, and was an invaluable experience for the world working class. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics lasted almost 70 years. The People's Republic of China has lasted more than 70 years and is a lifeline in the world today. We are on the eve of the biggest global capitalist crisis in history. We have to know this, a crisis that will be devastating to hundreds of millions of workers and create new revolutionary surges and new fascist threats. The Soviet Union was born in a revolution and never had a moment's peace from imperialist encirclement and sanctions. The Russian Revolution faced a unique challenge: how to extend the revolution to the oppressed nations of the old Tsarist Russian Empire, an empire of many nations bound together by feudal repression, how to build multinational unity. Lenin's concept was to guarantee the right of self-determination and respect for the national rights, representation, language, culture of every nation, regardless of size. The heritage of this revolutionary unity is still held today. Even in capitalist Russia, there are more than 100 nationalities that hold on to their rights of schools and culture and their own language. This in itself is important and worth noting. What this showed was it's possible to progress through cooperation, unity, and socialist planning. And that will hold deep roots among millions of working people. The union of the oppressed nation of workers and peasants, within a few decades, it rivaled the imperialist countries. It was a union built in the famous Congress of the Peoples of the East, an international, multinational conference, really that was an attempt to raise, through the banner of Marxism, support for the working class in Russia to the colonized people of the world. So what does this mean as we celebrate today? It means, first and foremost, we must always oppose our own imperialist rulers. The enemy is at home. Now, the Social Democrats are totally for this war in the Ukraine. They vote billions and billions of dollars and weapons. The war in Ukraine is only understandable if we start by looking at the purpose and the role of NATO, the US commanded military alliance. NATO, from its founding in 1949 at the end of World War II, existed as a US dominated military alliance, first against the Soviet Union and the war-ruined countries of Eastern Europe, struggling to build on a socialist basis. Immediately after the collapse of the USSR, NATO refocused on consolidating corporate rule throughout Eastern Europe, and totally dismembering and looting Russia. That's NATO's purpose. From its founding moment, NATO was an aggressive military apparatus to coordinate police and military and intelligence apparatus against the working class in Western Europe and to strangle the Soviet Union and the socialist bloc. For the past 30 years, NATO has been in steady expansion. US officers command this alliance, the largest military force in the world under a single command, dominating totally its 30 member states. NATO has a permanent integrated military command structure. And even though Ukraine is not an official member of NATO, it has participated under US command in US wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's received hundreds of millions of dollars in lethal military equipment from the US. NATO holds joint military drills inside Ukraine. Many drills are on Russia's border, overwhelmingly aimed at Russia and some at Iran and at China. Now, many people today say that, well, the US promised that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east in 1991. But when has the US government or any imperialist allies ever respected any treaty they've made? This is a band of pirates. What needs to be understood is why did NATO expand? Why was NATO's expansion inevitable? NATO expanded because the capitalist markets expanded to Eastern Europe. The defeat of socialism and the dismemberment of the Soviet Union, the auctioning off of formerly nationalized public property and industries was only possible with an enforcement organization. And that's what NATO is. I do urge everyone who is participating today to think of the January actions against US wars and saying no to NATO. I also want to point out that we've just launched an important book called Sanctions that we really think battering ram global economy, that explaining and understanding US sanctions. Thank you very much for today and this celebration of 100 years of the unity it took to forge the Soviet Union.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Again, with the Workers' World Party and the International Action Center. Last but not least, we are going to give it over to Angelo D'Angelo from the Party of Communists USA.
I'm going to talk very shortly, and I'd like to give 2 or 3 of my minutes to my comrades if she wants to use them to finish. I have nothing but respect for this woman. I worked with her for so many years against the Vietnam War, during the Vietnam War, and she was a real stalwart. Her and many of the people in Workers' World Party, I have nothing but respect for them, to be honest. Sam Marcy, I actually loved Sam Marcy. But I'm going to deal with tonight's class quickly. Friends, supporters of Soviet socialism throughout the world, including comrades from the United States, we cannot say anything both about what is going on that hasn't been said already. It has been said by all the speakers. I had the privilege of living in the Soviet Union for 3 months as a permanent citizen in June, July, and August of 1976. And it already convinced me what I already knew, that this was the future, that where we live here, and capitalism is not the future, it's the past. It's the real past, the way people lived in society. The future is what we had in the Soviet Union. It just convinced me theoretically what I already knew. On the current issue, the United States is on the side of fascism, plain and simple. In the last war, they joined the Soviet Union in an anti-fascist crusade. This time, they're working with the fascists. Wherever they are, the US is there. And NATO is their policeman of fascism. The Ukraine is the center of fascism today, in my opinion. And they voted, I don't know if you know this, in United Nations, there were only 2 or 3 countries. United States and Ukraine voted against anti-fascist resolutions that condemn fascism. I thought that was interesting recently. Ukraine voted against it. And the people on the left, many of them are so confused with what's going on there. They actually think that Ukraine is a democratic country. They banned all opposition parties, including the Communist Party. of the Ukraine, which was the second largest party before 2014. The Party of Regents was number one. The CP of Ukraine was number two. And then came all these other little parties that supported the West. So remember that. They just banned that. They also banned the trade union movement. I don't know if you know of that, if you realize that, what's going on. What people do you know in history that bans the trade union movement and bans the Communist Party? There's only one, the fascist movement. And that's what they are. Let's call them what they are. If I have 3 more minutes, I want to give it to Comrade.
The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you, Angelo. And yes, we do have many years of cooperation and struggle together, and been through many, many struggles. I'll just say in 1 minute that we come from many different political traditions, but the way to forge unity is in fighting imperialist war. It's in action. It's in who's willing to stand up today against both the fascist threat in Ukraine and imperialist war being waged on every front. And it's a very difficult struggle because there's lots of support for this war here, but we can and we should build resistance to US wars and to saying no to NATO. So thank you.
Thank you for that ending. And with that will conclude our webinar for this evening on the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the USSR. With that, I am going to go ahead and I will end the webinar tonight with a song that we always play at the end of our US Friends meetings, and that is "Wide is My Motherland." So we will end with that tonight.